Welcome committee members, liaisons, and members of the public to the Legal Services Trust Fund Executive Committee meeting. Thank you for joining us. We are using Zoom with the goal to foster a more inclusive environment and effective meeting. If you would like to comment during the meeting, please use the raise hand feature. Please utilize this tool to virtually indicate that you would like to speak in order to help the chair facilitate the discussion. A friendly reminder, this is a video conference. Per Bagley team requirements, all cameras must be kept on for the duration of the meeting. If you're unable to have your camera on, you must indicate a reason for your non-appearance during the meeting. Please be aware of the surroundings behind you. All committee meetings will be recorded and posted to the State Bar's website. Zoom captioning is available. To enable, select live transcript at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then select enable transcript. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Should we do roll call?
Yes. Alsaraf,
Present.
Connolly,
Present.
Escobedo, Milrod,
Present.
Blakemore,
Present.
Falcon,
Here.
Judge Rosie.
Here.
All right, and then I'll call our liaisons, Sabrina Copeland.
Present.
Melanie Snyder. Great, and I'll just make a note of State Bar staff. We have 6 members present and have quorum.
Awesome. Thank you, Crystal. All right. So I guess next I'll ask if there's any public comments. I don't see any.
No one has their hand raised.
Okay. Next is Chair's report, an oral report. Erica, I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to chime in on in terms of our report, but I didn't have anything to add in, but go ahead.
The only thing I'll say is I think I mentioned I'm not sure if we've met since the Board of Trustees meeting, but very exciting that the Board of Trustees approved our request to allow us to kind of write letters with obviously some guidance from the legislative director of the State Bar. So that's very exciting. And so really glad that for all the XComs and the commission's effort on that. And so I just wanted to, that's the big news I think on my end. And yeah, other than that, I don't know if Dwan, you're going to handle this in director's report, if there's any updates on what happened with the budget bill and that kind of stuff. But I think it's been a little bit since we passed or since we've chatted. So anyway, that's the only thing I have.
And great work, Erica. You shouldn't overlook yourself or the effort you made on that.
Oh, thanks.
Really nice achievement.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the staff really prepping and getting everything set up. So thank you all very much.
Well, thanks everyone. It's exciting. I think I just got the email about the appointments for the next year, so it's official, and looking forward to working with everybody on this group and kind of building out the next year.
Oh, can you share that, Amin? What are you talking about? What are you referring to? I don't think I got the email.
You didn't get the email?
No.
Yes,
I think I know what you're talking about, but I did not get the email.
From the Supreme Court. Let's see, what is it?
It's CC'd to Michelle Curran, who's the Administrative Director of the Judicial Council, and Melanie Snyder. And I'm surprised they didn't send it to staff.
No, I did not see the email. Is it our officer appointments?
It's the officer appointments.
Oh, okay.
So so myself and Erica as co-chairs, Efrain and Patience as co-vice chair.
Oh, congratulations.
Through September 14, 2026. So
yay, wonderful.
I also didn't get that, so if you could forward it to me. It sounds like I am apparently doing this again. It would be helpful to know. So thank you. I'll keep an eye out though in my email. Maybe it just went awry.
I mean, could you forward it to us? Because we log it in our office. We have what is it, an appointments office, so we get that all logged.
Okay, I'm gonna send it to, yeah. All right, I'll forward it on.
Thanks, Amin.
Yeah. It came in last night, so you know,
Congratulations.
there's still some time, I suppose, but and my name is misspelled in part of it, but that's okay. That happens all the time. Okay, so I guess let's jump next to Dwan for a director's report.
Right. So I was going to do this at the very last item, but since you just talked about appointments, I wanted to let everybody know that Xavier, who's on the commission, he decided to step down early. He had familial and professional kind of obligations. So we do have that position is a trust fund commission appointee. So you guys, we can decide now, you know, usually it goes through the executive committee to make a recommendation to the full commission. So we have in the past when the commission has had open seats, we run it concurrently with the state bar's appointments process, meaning that the state bar's application, we just this commission has access to all of those. We are happy to work with our appointments office again because it's kind of off cycle to again reopen the application process. One idea that I had was I know the Judicial Council had some really great applicants that, you know, they had more applicants than we had seats for in the last cycle. So I had asked Melanie if perhaps, and I know this was done in the past, but I don't know if they could do this again, share those applications with us so we have a starting point, because if there's a good application already in there, you might want to consider maybe just using their application and having an appointment. But we're also happy to take it through kind of the process. It's just we are out of cycle. That's the only thing. So I'll have to work with kind of Crystal and our operations team to figure that out. But I did want to let you know we do have an opening. If you have somebody that you think might be interested, because I don't know what the application situation is now, why don't you at least send them to me and that I will figure out what application they need to fill out, or we can fill one out that's like they just I think need to modify the dates because usually they don't open appointments until at the end of this year, beginning next year for the next cycle. But if you have somebody in mind, we don't want to lose a good applicant.
What role is open? Is this
It's a commissioner on our trust fund commission, but it's a legal services trust fund commission appointee. It's a non-public, it's a client eligible position. Or actually, I think it is a non-eligible. I had to check that. I can't confirm that right now.
And Duan, do they just fulfill Xavier's term? Is that how it works?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I don't remember, is Xavier a community member, an attorney member?
It's not, we've done away between public and an attorney because the commission is codified. So it's different than some of our other sub entities. I think like for our, like COAF, there was like a public versus non-public. For us, there's two that the commission is required to appoint that's client eligible. I don't believe Xavier fell into that category, but I'll have to confirm that. So I think it's just a regular, like most of you all are. So we will get back to you on that. Okay.
Sorry, and Dwan, if you can remind, maybe also mention it, and this might get switched up as we go through in terms of committee makeups, where Xavier was serving on the committee as well. That might have.
You know, I don't have that top of my head. Crystal, do you know that, or maybe you can pull that up while I do the other. I want to say he was on the grant eligibility support committee, but
He was on. I think he was on rules committee.
Was he on rules committee? Okay.
Yeah, because he was in a working group with me.
Yeah. But you know, we're close enough towards like we do the shuffle around, you know, towards the end of the year. So it's only like one or two more meetings. I think for the rules committee, if he's on the rules committee, Catherine might remember. I want to say there's one more rules committee meeting. So you're short for one. Is there two more? Okay.
Because there's the one that's coming up in August.
Oh, that's right.
And
then
there's one additional one before we present in that all the rules at the last commission meeting.
So two meets. You'll be short one member, Catherine.
It's okay.
I
think we have a pretty robust committee. So
yeah, that's a great committee. Then I have a quick IELTA update for you. So interest rates still have not dropped. So we are pulling in stronger than we had projected. So we're projecting $162 million for this year. Right now we're tracking to pull in about $168 million, $170 million. So a little bit more than what we are anticipating, which is great. Selena, did you have a?
Do you mind saying those numbers again and where we're at? I always like to know.
Oh, sure. We're we were projecting 162 million for the entire year.
Okay.
And now we revise our projection to 168.
Okay.
So we should pull ahead. I mean, but it's hard to say. I mean, I know I say this every single time. There's just like, it's every Fed meeting, there's like, we build in a drop though. So we have cover for that. But if it's more than what we had built in, then obviously it'll go down. But so far, we're strong. We should be able to clear the year fine, I would say. Okay. Then my next legislative EF update is, yes, the budget bill, the 2026 budget bill passed. Our equal access funding grants is base level. We were anticipating that. We're just happy that there are no decreases to that. So we'll be distributing about $35 million for EF formula grants, and then there's about 3 million something for partnership grants, but we have a little bit of a heavier partnership reserve that we've decided we're going to distribute it all this year. And so that partnership distribution amount that you'll see at the commission meeting is going to be a little bit heavier than we usually distribute. It's around 5 or 6 million instead of our usual $3 to $4 million. Then the other substantive update, and I sent an email about this. There was a version of the budget bill that had a pretty broad restriction on EF funding. That restriction now still exists, but it's a lot more narrow. So we're happy to say that the current language now only limits the use of EF for legal services defending a person against removal from the United States, consistent with the restrictions set forth in paragraph 3 of subdivision B, and then it cites kind of the penal code and for defending immigrants with a violent or serious felony. So that's the piece now. It's more narrow for an immigrant with a violent or serious felony conviction as defined under the penal code. Before it was kind of broadly speaking any felony. And then it was could have been interpreted to limiting not just immigration legal services. So this is, though not ideal, a lot narrower than we thought. And I think it's workable because they can always pivot our programs if they needed to. They can pivot and use IOLTA funding or some of our other streams of funding. It'll just be the restriction just applied to EF funding. The other update we have is the California Housing Finance Agency that we contract out for our foreclosure money. They had a little bit money left over, $300,000, that they did an amendment contract for us. So we are doing a reallocation for that. And as you know, the staff has authority to run that reallocation. It's a small amount of money, but it gives a little bit of a boost for each of the programs that are electing to opt in for that. And that is all. Those are all of my announcements. Turn it back over to you, Amin.
Okay, thanks, Fawn. All right, let's go on to the committee reports. And the first up is going to be the Grant Eligibility and Support Committee. Jason, turn it over to you.
Thanks, Amin. So hopefully this will be quick, but there's at least one item that I think is a little bit dicey that we should talk about, and I'll get to that at the end along with Dwan. So June 24th, GES exercised its delegated authority to approve the 2025 CARE Act CARE Court awards and amounts for county public defender offices. Those, as a reminder, the now passed Budget Act for 2025 required the Trust Fund Commission to finalize the awards and amounts by July 1. Of the 8 applicants for a grant, the scoring team recommended 6, 4 QLSPs and 2 support centers for an award. Committee approved those 6 proposals, leaving the remaining funds for county public defenders' offices and the Office of the State Public Defender. We met last Friday for our July 25th committee meeting. That was to finalize recommendations for partnership grants. We also dealt with a few IOLTA EAF eligibility issues. We had 3 ERCs, eligibility review conferences, that were conducted. We're going to discuss those in more detail at next week's commission meeting. This is the dicey one. We expect heavy discussion, at least regarding 2 of the ERCs at the full commission. Issues presented this year provide an opportunity for us to review our application review process. So for anyone who was present during the meeting or heard about the meeting or watched the meeting that we had last week. We had quite a lot of debate and discussion, more discussion about things we could do to maybe improve the eligibility review conferences and or structure. I'll let Dwan talk about some initial thoughts that she's kind of put together to try to think about like what are our lessons learned from this process at this stage and how can we make some adjustments to our process to give us a little bit more comfort and confidence as we move forward. So Dwan, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah. So this is part of a larger kind of analysis that I was hoping to have some numbers for you today, but usually the couple weeks before the commission meets, our staff is running the IOLTA, like a test of the IOLTA formula based on like qualified expenditures number. So I was hoping to give you some kind of numbers, but I'm not going to be able to until probably not next week's commission meeting, but the following commission meeting, where we're going to do kind of a more full analysis of like the impact of like new grantees in our community. And this is part of the reason why this is coming to a head. So, previous to the pandemic, we had always hovered between about 99 grantees, 101, 102. Sometimes one would drop off, one would be added in. But obviously the need for legal services during the pandemic kind of really exacerbated just everything. And so we've been seeing an uptick in grantees, which is great. There are now, we have more grantees than we've ever had as part of our community. So different services are provided, different areas of the state are reached, just a lot more. The difficulty though is, as you all know, our funding is already very unstable, right? It tracks interest rates. So given the size, the very large increase over the years, so we went from about, again, 99 to 100. For this year, where we had 6 new applicants, and again, if they all qualify, we're going to be closer to 120. So that's roughly a 20% increase in our the organizations that apply for funding. So that's a very large increase from going from 100 to 120. Not only does it require a lot more technical assistance on our end for our programs, there is a lot of shifting that's being done at the county level and for organizations. And again, I had a little bit more data to share with you, but I will have something hopefully in the next meeting or two to share with you. So why that's coming to a head. So because every cycle now that we're getting anywhere between, I would say, 3 and 8 new applicants, it's creating a lot of extra work for us to review. When we review kind of our organizations that come back, and a lot of our organization, I want to say at least 70 or 80% of them have been part of our community since the kind of the inception of the grant program, right? So they've been funded by us for 30 or 40 years. So we have a great understanding of them. We've gone on, dozens of monitoring visits. We know their staff. We visited their offices. We've seen kind of their clinics. So when we review their application, it's a lot easier, right? It's still a very technical application, and I think Patience and Catherine can appreciate this. This is not an easy kind of application. It's very technical. It's very rules-based. We try to like guide our grantees to it. And even the best of our grantees, there's like a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of opening up applications to revise, a lot of explaining things, a lot of making sure the numbers are right, even for longstanding grantees. I say this all to say that when you get 6 new applicants in a cycle, we're dealing with now really revisiting the protocol to make sure first we're doing a thorough job, that we have a consistent understanding of what that means for both kind of the staff and having the commission understand kind of the level of like vetting that needs to be done. I think you guys probably need a little bit more of a fuller understanding of how we review the application, and not just from like commissioners that have filled out the application, but I think there probably needs to be a more broad understanding of what we do and having some comfort in the vetting. Anecdotally, some of our newer organizations that have come through, some of them come through and they only last maybe a year or two because they're too small, our reporting requirements are too large, or sometimes on the back end, we're dealing with like compliance issues. So this is like percolating some issues to kind of think about, do we need to revise our grant application? Do we need to think about doing a heavier vetting process at the front end for new applicants? Do we think about, and these are things, I don't have answers for you, but these are things I think we should think about as commission. And I'd love your kind of thoughts on like how to like do it in a organized manner to get a recommendation to the commission. So there are going to be things like right now, we have a standard for granting audits and late audits, right? Extraordinary circumstances. But when you do that for a new grantee, it's just, even if they meet that standard, there's one new grantee now that had an eligibility review conference that's raising a lot of issues. But because we granted them, or we're suggesting to the full commission next week to grant them an extension of a month, what that meant is that we're reviewing an organization of a $15 million expenditures across 60 staff, brand new to us, in the span of 3 weeks, to do that in-depth review in the span of 3 weeks, and the back and forth. It's been pretty grueling. And I think for any commissioner that has that was part of the eligibility review conference this year knows that there was so much back and forth with our new grantees. So this is why I say this is an opportunity, I think, to kind of really think about our process and how we ensure both that there is like the internal controls piece from our grantees, because when we do a paper review, you don't quite get that. We look at the audits to see if there are any serious findings in the audit, but we don't do that testing piece of that. So one question is, do we make all new grantees be subject to an audit and we don't grant extensions? I mean, there's just a lot of ideas, and these are just kind of really initial conversations to kind of think about. What I'd love kind of your feedback on is like, is this like a worthwhile endeavor? I think the staff think it is, just because there are so many, and you'll see at next week's meeting, it's raising a lot of process questions. One of the process questions I think I will personally have to grapple with is, we provide so much technical assistance in this office. We don't turn down like a question from one of our applicants or one of our grantees, but at what point does it need to be kind of that valve of TA shut off? Is it reasonable for staff to work up until the time of the ERC and we're submitting multiple drafts? I don't know. These are questions I think I personally have to grapple with. I'd love kind of insight and some direction from the commission, because at some point it does feel like not only are you spoon feeding a little bit, but it may be unintentionally, it might not be the desired outcome. Maybe we move towards asking more open-ended questions, and I don't know. So these are all questions I think we need to start to think about, so that we all feel more comfortable with the process, and so that the community and external stakeholders have comfort in our kind of vetting process. But I'll stop there. Jason?
Yeah, thanks, Dawn. I think another thing that came up when we were talking through this at GES is, we schedule out a monitoring visit for new grantees, and depending on how we evaluate and potentially the lack of validation earlier at ERC, right? There's a possibility that things come up in a monitoring visit after they've been awarded potentially a significant amount of funds in a zero sum like ILTA or EAF, right? Or really many of our grant programs that are not competitive, and even in competitive programs, there are implications to those who are not recipients or not recipients of as much money, because this new organization came in, and then I think it's a risk, so perhaps theoretical, right? That you then find out something in a monitoring visit, and what is the potential implication of the result of a monitoring visit revealing something that, had we known at the ERC stage, we could have done more to prevent its implication on other providers. So I think we're just weighing, and to Dwan's point, kind of considering like, what is an appropriate amount of information to ask? Are there certain criteria where it's like, okay, well, if you are in this category for whatever reason, or you've met this criteria, then we need to validate need more validation, or we need an audit or something up front to reduce risk profile for giving the grant out and then having it come up later in a monitoring visit or whatever. So I think that's the thought process is, how much is it front loaded, to Dwan's point, recognizing that front loading some of this work complicates the process, especially for some of our smaller grant applicants. And then how much of it is appropriate to put later on, and we just kind of move these applicants through the process. And I don't know that there's a perfect balance, but I think for us as a commission, it's worthwhile to consider, like, what is the information that should be provided to staff, that should be evaluated by staff and or commissioners and ERCs, so that we have an appropriate level of confidence in the award and the implication of the award on the entire grantee community, and therefore the beneficiaries of those grantees, right? So I think that's just the crux of it. And as a result of it being, I think, kind of a messy, non-perfect, like there's not a clear-cut solution to all of it. That's what makes it tough, right? And worth discussing. And that's why we talked about it at GES for like an hour and a half or so. And we're still talking about it. I think it'll just probably still continue. And it'll probably end up, looking at Catherine, like probably end up back, like, do we need to adjust the rules to reflect some of this stuff? But, I think it's, what I highlighted at GS is like, I think this is a lesson learned for like, oh, there are these complicated kind of, it's not quite confidence inspiring on either end necessarily, but the rules are the way they are. And so do you move it through? But the implications, like, all right, I'll stop talking now and I'll turn it over to Catherine, but, happy to answer any questions as committee chair that I can.
So thanks, Jason, for all your work. I did not listen to the meeting. I've heard little bits of it, but not anyway. It sounds like you did a good job managing that. But I guess I had two thoughts, and I don't know the process by which we're going to have more of a discussion, but I do think it crosses over to rules. And I guess I had a couple of sort of bigger picture thoughts about this. Like, would it be possible to have a earlier application date if you were going to be a new grantee? So 6 months before the grant cycle starts for recurring grantees, and that we're clear about what then has to be provided so you can kind of test better what's happening. And then is there a mechanism by which the rules could change to say, there's a provisional or conditional eligibility category where, like, we still have questions, and it sounds like Kristen maybe thought of this already. We have questions about some of this. And so because we think you meet the standards, we're going to approve you, but you're held to meeting and demonstrating these things throughout the year. And I just think clarity about some of those things at the front end, one would reduce, it would give staff a more reasonable amount of time to do the evaluation that they certainly are able to do, but like in this truncated period with lots of back and forth, it's just never going to work. And second, it would provide us some confidence that if you become a grantee, you're then you know what standards you're held to, and there's a quicker way to address the problems that might arise or to indicate you're not going to be a grantee, right? So anyway, that's just two things I kind of thought about.
At least,
happy to work with whoever.
Yeah, at least from my perspective as GES chair, I think those are both reasonable and appropriate steps to try to kind of take these lessons learned from the situation and kind of what our observations are to try to tackle, like, how do we make this process more confidence inspiring and also fair to existing and new applicants, and I think those are really good ideas. And I agree. I think it implicates rules directly. I think it
so there might be some way that somebody from your committee and rules committee could work on this jointly to help come up with a framework, which I think would be really terrific. So happy to embark on that.
That's great. Thanks, Catherine and Jason. Patience.
Thanks. There's one other thing. I love the idea of giving them a longer runway, whatever you want to say. I was thinking, given the cyclical nature of the thing, maybe you have to become a pre-applicant this year if you want to apply for money next year. I don't know. I love the idea of a provisional grantee category, because that I think assuages some of the concern, although the disruption that was on everyone's mind at the committee meeting had to do with, you have a zero-sum pot of money, you bring in a new grantee and all the allocations get rejiggered, and so all of a sudden, yeah, it's a that has the potential to be very disruptive for other grantees, for the other grantees. So that's definitely a problem. But one thing I would love to see us figure out how to do is how to take advantage of the fact that many of our new applicants are already grantees of very rigorous grant programs. So they have had to make showings, and they have had to show deliverables, and I mean, one of the grantees that a lot of the conversation went on and on about was been in this nonprofit business for 30 years and had every indication was highly professional staff. So I wonder if we could somehow make use of the fact that other people are also have in the past and are presumably currently keeping tabs on these folks, insisting on fiscal responsibility, and they're not taking the money and going to Tahiti with it, whatever. So it would be it could, if we could figure out how to do that, it was a long-standing crazy making thing when I was an AD that we had to, every single grant application was different from every single other grant application, and you had to say some of the same things, but you might have to say it differently, and there was very little, it felt like there was a whole lot of wasted time. When they're you want to know if we're going to be responsible, right? Well, we can show you that. And the showing could be the same for the state bar as it is for the President Foundation. So I'm not saying we're going to get to that, because I'm not suggesting that that's what ends up happening, but I'm just wondering if there's a way to make use of information that's already available about organizational stability, and professionalism, and all the things that are of concern, so that we're sure that the money does get granted. We're not going to hit the monitoring visit, go, shoot, I can give these people $1 million. So I do think that information is out there, and we ought to be looking for it. Celine.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts, because I feel like I've seen a large number of large grantees recently, but also small grantees. It's across the board, the new grantees and the kind of issues that are unearthed to explore. And I like the idea of a newer application or an earlier application period, because I feel like a lot of the friction has been around timesheets, intake questions. And I know some organizations, when they told me that they were planning to apply, they changed their intake process because they were able to provide what you needed to know because they knew in advance. And having an early application, like an initial application, they could even change a process to do a time test to say, yes, we can say that X number of our clients are qualifying because we now ask for income. So I like that, because it gives us a chance to communicate earlier and clearer without any kind of negative consequence. And also the financial controls piece. Some of your newer grantees have had financial controls that you've been concerned about. And so having an earlier conversation about financial controls, how you write checks, how you do QuickBooks, that earlier in the process, giving them a chance to correct before it's too late, seems really supportive. And I have another thing too, which I would like to offer, is that Lackawanna Justice are hosting a deputy director retreat quite soon. And for the new applicants who I know them, I reached out to them and said, send your deputy director. I assume you're very likely to be IELTS funded. And so if y'all wanted to extend that invitation more formally to them, I want the new programs to feel like they're part of a community, and the deputy directors, those are the folks who have to deal with so much of the reporting. And so having them together to talk about it and how do you interpret this, I think is a really helpful thing. So whenever you make your final decision, if you want to invite the newer deputy directors, we're doing it in Pomona in September.
Excellent. Erica, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I think all of these are really great ideas. The one thing I just wanted to say out loud is just sort of the difference between, or I see a difference between whether an organization has sufficient sort of infrastructure and financial controls to be responsible stewards of the money is, I think, a slightly different issue as to whether they qualify for our funding and like what it is we need to see to ensure, you know, our qualifications. And I love Patient's idea of like, if they're already sort of showing up their like internal controls and those kinds of things in other contexts, can we not be redundant, right? Can we sort of have some way in which they can use things from other, you know, programs that they've applied to or grants that they've applied to, or we can take similar, you know, information. But I do think our qualified expenditures, primary purpose, those are a little unique to our particular program and the formula. And so it's not that I think I'm worried that the grantees aren't good at internal controls generally. It's just whether their view of our rules is the same as our view of our rules, and then having, you know, some question later. I love the idea that Catherine came up with about sort of this provisional, right, where we can sort of get initial information, you know, move forward with it, but then there's sort of this opportunity to kind of test. I do want to balance. We don't, you know, it's a formula grant. Anyone who qualifies is allowed to get the money, right? And so we don't want to be overly protective of like existing grantees to the exclusion of new grantees. But I do think as good stewards of the money, we do want to ensure that new grantees actually qualify based on the rules that we've applied. So I think all of the ideas are really great that we've shared. I just wanted to kind of pull those two issues apart just to make sure, for my sake, like there was some clarity on that part.
I just was gonna, I think there's currently within the monitoring rules that if you are an LSC organization and you had a review within the last 3 years or something, that review gets sort of moves the needle and gets you some status that certain things are in place. And I'm
You
not
get
gonna-
presumption for
Specific
LSC. You have a presumption of meeting primary purpose if you are LSC funded or OAA funded, and that's in our. I can't remember. I think it's in their statute that when we review the application and we see that you know it's not the review I would say is a little lighter on the internal controls piece of it, but yes, your memory is very good, Catherine.
Well, and I guess the question is, so not necessarily for primary purpose as much, but for some of the other things, there are other programs that are large and have significant federal grants or other state grants. And I just want to just adding to the list of things that we could consider is when you're looking at internal controls, if another agency that provides oversight has determined that their internal controls are adequate, right? Then do we need to spend as much time on things that are common across grantees? I agree with Erica that some things are unique to the trust fund, but other things like internal controls are, for the most part, good internal controls, no matter which organization's funding you. So I think there just might be a way to expand that concept a bit.
And just to be clear, at the application level, we have a question around internal controls. And then again, we have that presumption for LSC, but we don't actually spend a lot of time at the eligibility phase on internal controls. I think the crux of like the eligibility phase is whether it's the primary purpose and if your QEs are correct, because we need accurate QEs so that we can run the formula. And so the analysis is a little bit, you know, heavy on that front at the application phase. But I do love all these ideas. So, you know, the question for you all was going to be, how do we go about coming up with a recommendation? Because I looked at the roster for the GES committee. So the grant eligibility support committee deals with all the compliance issue. It's kind of like the reformulated eligibility review conference for a couple commissioners here that had used to chair that. But you know, when I looked at the roster, there were a lot of members on that new GS committee that hadn't done eligibility review before. So I don't know if providing it, even though that seems to be kind of the natural mechanism, would be the best kind of venue. But I do like, Catherine, your idea, and perhaps it's like, one, but somebody from GES and maybe somebody on rules, because some of these are going to be like, again, internal things that maybe I can just make a decision to kind of change process. Some is going to require a commission meeting, some is going to require a rule change, and some might even just require initial conversations with the legislature and a statutory if we go in kind of that route. So kind of depending on where it is, will require where it lands. But I like that idea a lot, working with staff to come up with something like a schema of how we're going to deal with this and recommendations.
And I guess I think I haven't looked particularly at the materials for next week, but I don't know whether there's other rules that have to change. We tried our best in the rule that talked about sort of what are legal services, which then can inform like primary purpose, but are they as clear as they need to be? I don't know the answer to that because I don't really know what's come up, but it's just another thing to think about in maybe some work group that had, membership from both the grants committee as well as rules, which I think would benefit both groups. I think we'd have both perspectives, I think. So anyway. Sorry, Erica, I didn't see your hand when I started talking.
No problem. I actually, and partly I have to run for a minute, in a minute or two, but I did want to just make a statement about the TA issue, because that is something that Dawana brought up. And let me say, obviously very grateful for the help that the staff provides to grantees. But I think this issue has come up before, and I'm going to say again, I think there needs to be a cap. There needs to be a limitation. Often what ends up happening is I think the staff works incredibly hard, which again, I'm very grateful for, but I also think it can build reliance in a way on certain things. And we have a very odd position, which I've flagged before, where we're both trying to help grantees, but we're also the oversight body of them. And so I think having some guidelines about TA, what the TA should be and how much it should be is I think an important thing for us to consider, through rules committee or something else. I'm not trying to say it's 20 hours and you're done or whatever, but I do think it would be probably helpful for you guys. And I think give notice to the grantees, this is, because we are an oversight body and not just facilitating grants, we need to, I think, rebalance them. But Dawan, I'm super curious to hear what the staff thinks about it. If they have suggestions, they're the ones who are doing the work. But I'm very supportive of doing some kind of rule or guidance or something that just makes it a little clearer what grantees can and cannot expect from staff.
I appreciate that. And just to give you all context, so Erica Carroll, who used to run the committee coordinator for EBR. So her and I, for a number of years, have kind of tag team. I would say the pre-TA. So an organization comes through and they tell us before the application is due that they're interested. We meet with them. In some instances, we meet with them repeatedly. There was a support center that it didn't end up applying, but for this year that I met with them at least 5 times. I looked at their itemization. I looked at their qualified expenditures to give them a preliminary. This is honestly the level of TA that we do so that going in, they know what the issues are or whether they should apply or not apply, because it's such a investment, right? So with some new organizations, they need to decide whether they need to invest in an audit. So for them to do that, we actually help with that sweep. And then sometimes we tell them, we don't think you're ready yet, but these are the things that you need to do. Perhaps your internal controls, or perhaps you're not timekeeping, come back in a year. And when they take us up on the offer, sometimes in 2 years, they come back in 3 years, and they're very successful. We don't have that back and forth. I think, that level of TA beforehand, I personally think that's a service that we do for the community. I think it's a great thing that we give them that level. I think that the piece that's making me uncomfortable is once the application is due and we go into application mode, and then the level of TA we give them. And then is it this is the piece that's hard. Even our existing grantees, they need us to open up the application because they've done it wrong, and so we revise. But at what point do we need to just shut it off and say, here are rules, you submit what you have, and the commission is going to make a determination, or the commission will call an ERC with you, and that's pretty much it, and that's the information. If you don't meet it, and maybe you would have if you had everything, but it's also comfort level, I think, for both the commission and the staff, thinking that at some point we have to, it's okay for us to cut it off, because first our staff is too stretched, and maybe it's a fairness issue, right, with other grantees that. So I think that's the question for me, the line. I don't know if it's the before the application, because before the application, I personally feel really comfortable providing that level of TA to staff, and I've enjoyed getting to know staff, and Erica has done a great job giving, again, that level of assistance. Again, we tag team it, and now there are other staff members in our office that are beginning to do that kind of technical assistance. It's a great opportunity for us to kind of interact with non-IELTS programs. But I do think there is something to be said about TA the day before, the 2 days before an ERC meeting is due, and us having to go back and redraft the whole entire recommendation, and then our commissioners not having time to review the ERC memo because we had just redone it, and giving you all a very short amount of time. It is just way too tight, and it's too much on our staff. Like, these audit extensions that you're going to hear about, I know it comes from a really good place. We want to be of service and be flexible, but we had a recommendation yesterday that the staff, like, we were because the audit came through over the weekend, and then late on top of that version of it, we all had to scramble to look at it. Like, is that fair? Is that fair to, like, staff? Is it fair to commissioners? Is it fair to other programs? That's a piece we're really struggling with.
All right, everyone, I've got to run, but I wish you luck, and I'll get a readout later. And I will see you all next week. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
You're going to enjoy the time.
Thanks.
I
I'll
just
jump
want
in.
to say,
Oh,
I
go ahead.
really support the idea of sorting out the TA role. And I think Dwan knows sort of where I stand on this, because there was a program that was having a lot of trouble, and the amount of hours staff invested in trying to do what is really staff work, the program staff work, is not something I really feel like pretty clear-headed of. There's a role for reviewing somebody's grant materials, and there's the role of the program demonstrating that they can actually do the work and administer the program. And when those roles get blurred, I think it hasn't happened, but when you're giving people advice about what they need to do, or on occasion where staff has been doing their work, it becomes the bar's work that you're then reviewing. And if then the commission denies it based on the work that you did, it becomes very awkward, I think. So I think clarity about that would be really helpful for everyone. And it doesn't mean I don't appreciate what you do. I just think you do too much.
Thank you for that.
And I'll add, I think this is, I agree. Like, I think it's fantastic that we do it. I think it's important. There's a lot of education that we are able to provide to these new programs about what our funding is intended for, all that stuff that may not be readily apparent from the rules, or may not be readily apparent from the materials that's available to them. But it does start getting to a point it could start getting to a point where I think it's even more, it's sort of like it's reviewing our own analysis and interpretation, and then maybe not having as much of an objective, in theory, potentially, there's a risk of like not having an objective view of that report in a recommendation, or the application in a recommendation. I think there's a reliance issue. I think there's a resource allocation issue for sure. And but the level of kind of transparency that we provide, I think there should be a point at which we have to understand that, like, the onus is on them to establish for us that they are eligible. And at some point there should be a limit as to how we can help them do that. And I don't know if that's something that we can do on here's a rule that establishes some, bright line guidelines, because this is very fluid. There's facts are going to change at every level. Can you put a date on, the time on which you can give? I mean, I think it, post application, that's probably an easy one to do, to say, nothing post application submission. And that probably does away with a lot of the risk, but it's a dice one. And I think it would be good to sort of incorporate that in a discussion with staff with, you know, to kind of build that in. But Patience, go ahead.
I know we're not going to decide this today, but I just want to say, you know, theoretically, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that it is the burden needs to be on the program to establish capacity, and not just eligibility, but capacity. If you cannot sort your way out of a paper bag, then do, you know. So I know, I mean, I shudder to think how many extra hours we cost staff, because this staff, my own staff person didn't really grasp this thing, and the person who normally does it wasn't there, but we, you know, whatever. So I know we were really grateful for staff's generosity, and I hope we didn't, like, I just can't remember, but I sure hope we didn't, like, hey, we know the thing is tomorrow, but could you, but I guess there's a certain expectation that you create when you are so generous, and it's going to be a bucket of ice water on some folks to realize that, oh, wait a minute, but I would encourage us to figure out how to do this in a reasonably humane but efficient way, that so that people are not, I mean, it just is not right that, you know, the day before the ERC, you know, you get it. I mean, that all by itself is like, I'll just let the ERC know you're not ready. That's fine. We'll cancel the meeting.
Yeah.
We'll see you next year, you know, whatever. So anyway, I know we're not solving this right now, but I do personally want to thank you and your staff, Dawn, for all the kindnesses, and I hope we deserve them is all.
Thank you for that. So I think the path forward is, if I'm hearing it, you let me know, is we create a working group of a couple of staff members, and then maybe Jason, you can decide whether it's yourself or somebody on your committee, and Catherine, the same. You can decide whether it's you or somebody on rules committee that you want to delegate it to, and then we'll get that formed, and hopefully we'll get something preliminarily back at the November commission meeting. You know, at least some type of framework, if not some recommendations. If it's rules,
that's
it's
great.
going to be a rule change. It's going to take a little bit longer than that. Obviously, a statutory change, then we have to like strategize on how we want to do that.
Yeah. And I guess just on patience, I feel like it's not a zero-sum game in the world. Like what the bar staff shouldn't be doing. Honestly, I would tell a program, go join LAC, pay your dues, and get technical assistance about some of this from LAC, because that's what LAC's, they're there to support programs. And the bar at some point becomes the decider about whether you're going to be eligible or not. And just being clear about those roles and referring people to other places they can get help is maybe wise. Anyway, sorry.
Selena, do you want to? I see.
I did not see that.
Timely hand raise, yeah.
No, I was thinking that, you know, if we consider a rule change that would especially impact newer new future applicants, I think it might help if we figured out how to get anonymous feedback from recent new applicants to figure out where the pressure points were, where the friction was, where there appeared to be misunderstanding. Because I've talked to one of your 2026 grantees who was like, yeah, the reporting for the application was, you know, well, a lot more than we were used to, and they're not a small grantee. So like figuring out where the pieces are that people would like more of a heads up, so there's less of that back and forth TA if they had like a FAQ or something, or like what to look out for in advance.
Or they just talk to you.
It will probably not be me, just so you know, because I played it before, but we have a lot of people who haven't done an ERC.
Yes.
Hi, it's me. I haven't done one. So I would not nominate myself. I could probably think about it in the abstract, but
Sure.
someone who's done the ERC is going to be a valuable contributor to helping to construct things. I would say let's find the right person with the experience.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that sounds like we've got a good plan forward to address this issue, and I think this context is going to be helpful for some of the discussion that comes up next week. on particular programs that are having eligibility that have gone through this process recently. So I think with that, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is a report from the Program Development and Impact Committee. Judge Rosie.
Thanks, everyone. Let me just pull my notes up. So we met on June 11th. And took care of some things that I'll share with you. PDI committee exercised its authority, which Commission delegated to PDI to approve the reallocation of the 23-24 HP4, the Homelessness Prevention Grant Funds. And just as a reminder to folks, because of the way we wrote the new charters for the committees, this is the last time that we will probably need to reapprove the reallocation. We talked at length at the June 11 meeting about the new community justice worker proposal. And we, at that meeting, we had folks from LAC and Legal Link, One Justice, etc. And we created a working group of PDI folks to evaluate the proposal. I'm on that group. Aaron is on that group, and Judge Yang is on that group. And actually, that working group has its first meeting at 3 this afternoon. So I'll be able to share a little bit more about that next week if folks want to hear about it. We also have a legal aid justice tech collaborative working group. That working group has Jacqueline and Vanetta and myself. We will have our second meeting next week. We're reviewing for folks, just for folks as a reminder, we're reviewing the Harbor Report findings and recommendations, and we'll be discussing the suggestions for that initiative's work plan implementation and perhaps a timeline. We are also working on the legal aid data project with an advisory group for that, advisory working group for that. That is, I think, Aaron and Ken, and they meet next week as well. Since their last meeting, the state board staff has been analyzing and synthesizing the data for the last 5 years and examining responses from the 46 or so legal aid providers that participated in the 2019 and 2024 Justice Gap studies. And then one other thing that we're working on is the Changing Landscapes Thought Partnership. Our team is looking at the changing policy landscapes. I think Afreen, you're on that, and Ken and Maria are also there with you. And that's creating an impact brief on how state and federal policies are affecting our grantees. We're hoping that the brief can serve as a resource for grantees, help with advocating for funding, for example. And then the Thought Partnership is also sort of working on a series of regional convenings, hopefully for this fall. And I think that that is everything that we are working on, although if Chris is somewhere listening in, if I forgot something, he can ping me and tell me that I forgot something. But working on quite a few things, super busy committee, and excited to be meeting later today about the Community Justice Worker Program. Anyone have questions about the PDI committee? All right,
that's great. It's great to hear about the work that you guys are doing. Thank you, Judge Rosie. Let's jump next to the Rules Committee. Catherine, turn it over to you.
I will say I appreciate Rules Committee because it is the one committee that does not have an acronym, and I can actually remember what it is. So with that, we have not met since the last commission meeting because we've been busy working on rules. We have working groups that are doing that. So I'll just give you a little rundown. Our next meeting is after the next commission meeting. It's on August 22nd. So we, at the commission meeting, you're going to receive rules about fiscal standards. Those were actually started by the prior rules committee. They went out for public comment. LAC is supportive of them. And there were some other public comments that did not have a substance that required a change to the rules. So they're not going back to this rules committee. They're instead going to just go directly to the commission, and then they go to the board of trustees for approval. So you will see those. And I think we've talked about them before. I don't think there's anything in there that's going to be surprising. Jason and Patience and Erica Connolly, all of whom are on this committee, worked on all of those rules a year ago. So I bet you're going to be happy to see those finalized. And then we continue to work on the support center rules. We had kind of the first discussion we shared with you at the last commission meeting. We have developed kind of a second tranche of ideas about rules. The staff is soliciting comments from support centers. So that will happen. We're going to review that. And then the full rules committee will discuss those at the meeting on the 22nd. We hope also to have a presentation about the purchase of real estate that the general counsel's office is working on for that committee meeting. And we are also will have some a presentation about grantee investment policy, which staff has also been working on, and get comments from the rules committee. But it sounds like that one in particular will be something that is close to being finalized. So those are the things that are on our plate. Happy to answer any questions. And thanks to Erica Connolly and Kim Turner, who have been doing a very capable job of supporting the committee and the very busy working group. We meet a lot as a working group.
Erica
Just after me.
Yes.
Erica Carroll.
Erica Carroll, yes.
Yeah.
Sorry for
No.
saying the wrong C. I get them confused all the time. Erica Carroll, who's been terrific.
It's one of the more active working groups that I've been on, and it's been good because on the support center question, I think there's a lot there, and and we have a great group and great staff support to kind of navigate these issues, and I think there'll be some robust discussion at the rules committee and then potentially thereafter. Great, thank you, Catherine. Any questions, any follow-up on any of the committees? Okay, next item on the agenda is the approval of the April 30th open session minutes.
So move.
All right, we've got a motion. Do you have a second?
Catherine seconds.
Okay, let's do a roll call vote.
Okay, Blakemore,
Yes.
Falcon,
Yes.
Pedrosi,
Yes.
Escobedo,
Yes.
Milrod,
Yes.
Connolly, Alsroff.
Yes.
That's 6 yeses, 0 no's, motion passes.
All right, thank you. And do we have Elizabeth for the next? She got a presentation on the provisional licensure program. I see she's an attendee. All right.
Hi,
Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
great, thank you. Hi, everybody. As a reminder, I'm Elizabeth Hahn, Program Director in the Office of Access and Inclusion. I'm here to give just a short presentation on the Provisional Licensure Program with Dawn today. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Sorry, having a trouble making sure I can see all the things that I need to see. Okay. Okay. So for today's presentation, I'll go over the background of the program, including the most iteration of the program. And then what we would like to discuss a little bit with you is a potential opportunity for the Trust Fund Commission to collaborate with the Council on Access and Fairness related to supporting provisionally licensed lawyers, as well as next steps. The original provisionally licensed lawyer program was developed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, when the bar exam in July was delayed to October. The California Supreme Court ordered a temporary licensure program for 2020 law grads to practice law in supervised settings. This was not a pathway to licensure, as provisionally licensed lawyers, or PLLs, were still required to take and pass the bar exam to obtain a license to practice law. As you'll recall, and I'll go over a little bit more in detail shortly, the Trust Fund Commission supported 20 PLLs at grantee organizations through grants in 2021 and 2022. So here you'll see the requirements for the provisional licensure program. It was originally open to all 2020 law grads who had not passed the bar. They were required to have an active positive moral character determination or have submitted one that was pending. They were required to have either passed the MPRE or completed a 4-hour ethics training. And they were all required to complete 10 hours of new attorney training within a year of entering the program. PLLs, personally licensed lawyers, were required to be supervised by a California licensed attorney. And the original program had 912 participants, and as of June of this year, there were 67 remaining. And as I mentioned earlier, the Trust Fund Commission did fund 20 provisionally licensed lawyers at grantee organizations. This funding was directed through Business and Professions Code 6140.03, which allows the State Bar to collect donations through its licensing fee statement. So the commission funded 20 PLLs, and those PLLs served 43 counties, including 20 rural counties, working on issues related to the pandemic, to disasters, and rural issues, among others. And we did survey, our office did survey our grantees and the PLLs, and those survey responses were overall very positive. I also just wanted to note that as of 2023, this directed funding through the Business and Professions Code 6140.03 was converted to support our current Legal Aid Leaders Fellowship program. So after the original program was developed, or actually while the original program was being developed, the Provisional Licensure Working Group held a series of public meetings to develop the program. And during the public comment for this, there was feedback from the public related to the recent Supreme Court reduction in the bar exam cut score. So that's the bar exam pass score. As a result of that, the Supreme Court authorized this pathway program, which allowed bar exam takers who scored between 1390 and 1439 on the bar exam between July 2015 and February 2020 to also participate in a provisional licensure program. They were also required to have 300 hours of supervised legal work and a positive supervisor evaluation to become licensed. So this was a pathway to licensure program that had just over 1,000 participants. And as of June of this year, there were 149 that remained in the program. So earlier this year in June, in response to issues related to the administration of the February 2025 bar exam, the Supreme Court approved an extension of the provisional licensure program and expanded it to include first-time test takers who registered but withdrew from the February bar exam, as well as first-time takers who failed the February 2025 exam. This new program is set to begin on September 1st and extend through 2027. And at the same time, the Supreme Court also extended the existing provisional licensure program for existing participants. As you see on this slide, there are just over 1,000 eligible participants for the 2025 program, and you can see the breakdown of their composition here. They are a group that is more diverse when compared to the attorney population by gender and race ethnicity. And we also have a breakdown of the eligible participants by their law school type. So as a part of their work, the Council on Access and Fairness has studied alternate pathways to licensure through the Blue Ribbon Commission on the Future of the Bar Exam. And they also received a similar presentation to this one at their June meeting. Their presentation also included some in-depth information about a 2022 survey that provisionally licensed lawyers and supervisors participated in. In COAF's work, they had raised some concerns about an alternate pathway to licensure, including concerns about potential for abuse or discrimination, as well as compensation. And so there is currently a COAF working group reviewing survey data and providing recommendations to the state bar about how to better support this new cohort of potential provisionally licensed lawyers. When Dawn and I met with COAF in June, we also raised the possibility of another collaboration with the Legal Services Trust Fund Commission to support PLLs that are in legal aid organizations. And as you'll see in our next agenda item, we do have a proposal for CalHFA, additional CalHFA funding. That would include the option to include a fellowship for newer attorneys, including PLLs, which would allow grantees to apply for additional funding.
So we thought this could be a good collaborative opportunity, given that, you know, the Trust Fund Commission did fund a small amount of PLLs during the pandemic, and some of them were placed at our organizations. The ones that we funded were placed at our organizations, and beyond them, there were also more PLs separate from that funding stream that were hosted at legal aid organizations that the commission might want to consider working with. COAF has a little bit of a larger charge regarding PLL, but the commission might want to kind of formulate perhaps some guidance or some best practices for organizations, our legal aid organizations that are potentially would be hosting PLLs. So we thought that the crossover there might be a good opportunity to work to find some ways to kind of support these PLLs if they are in fact going to be placed at our legal aid organizations.
So we would welcome any questions or discussion, and I see your hand raised, Judge Rosie. So I'll before I hand it over to you, I'll just say, like, our next steps would be if the XCOM believes the commission would be interested in this, we could ask for a couple volunteers to work with staff and our COAF working group to develop this programming or support for PLLs, and then we could provide an update at a future meeting. So.
Great. Thank you, Elizabeth. I think it's a great idea. Judge Rosie, I'll let you jump in.
No, I was just gonna say the same, that I was gonna encourage us to work with COAF on this issue. I know Elizabeth was shocked to see my hand raised. And I actually sat in on that June COAF meeting as well and listened to the larger presentation and the feedback that COAF gave on this issue. So I was just going to encourage us, and as somebody who sat on the Blue Ribbon Commission as well, encourage us to get involved on this.
So we do have a little bit of a timing issue, and that's why we're bringing it to the executive committee. Normally, like an issue like this probably would go through Judge Rosie, your committee, to kind of think through a recommendation or perhaps how we get a working group member. But the PLL, Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, the PLL application is opening in September, is that?
Because the program will begin in September. So we're working towards getting everything set, yes, right now.
And so the COAF working group has already met. So I think ideally we'd love to have one or two commissioners join in the next kind of COAF meetings that set up, or we can set up a separate one. But because some of those meetings need to happen this month to kind of come up with a game plan, we might not need to flesh out everything, but in terms of what the commission is going to do, whether it's guidance, whether it's something else beyond that or less than that, we'd love to have that participation for this month. So that's why we're bringing it to the executive committee.
And just quickly, Chris, because I saw your face on here briefly, and now you've turned your camera off, but the PDI committee, can you remind me when we meet next?
It's the
August 28th.
yeah.
Oh, it's right
And
before,
that's
okay.
why when we were looking
Okay.
at the calendar, we're like, do we bring it through PI first and then to the commissioner's recommendation? But because of the timing, and we didn't want to have another meeting because you guys were meeting on a monthly basis, it felt like we could
Yeah.
tuck it into the executive committee
Cool.
meeting.
Great.
Selena?
Selena?
I love all the pipeline stuff y'all do. I think one thing that might be helpful for your grantees is before it launches, remind them of the program. Not everyone had a PLL, but this is a lot of PLLs.
Yeah.
And then remind them where they would report it in their expenditures.
Yes.
Because that's where you're going to see some confusion of like, are they lawyers? Are they not lawyers? Do we need to do
Yes.
a budget modification? Because I think a lot of organizations, if they're aware that they can hire a PLL, would be very interested in capturing this moment in time.
That's great. You know, we were thinking of a webinar already, and that's why we had one or two commissioners we can kind of think through a little bit. I mean, Elizabeth and I have spent quite a bit of time thinking about this, but having another brain or two so that we can kind of really like shape this in a way that's very positive for both our programs. It could, again, be a really great pipeline, but a positive experience for the PLL as well. Catherine, did you have your hand up? Or am I imagining that? No.
You did.
Okay.
I did not. For a
Okay.
change, I did not.
So with that, I don't know if there's somebody on the executive committee that is interested. And if there's not, we might reach out to you separately, or the next step, Elizabeth, we can also send out, I think it would be probably an email or to the commission rather than waiting till next week.
I mean, I'm happy to volunteer, and if you don't want me, for some reason, I can also reach out to other folks on the PDI committee, but I'm happy to be there if you want.
You know, we were hoping
My
you'd say
2
that.
cents.
You are a nice
Oh,
thread.
you were, yeah, because I was on CalHFA, so you
You
were
are on
helping us.
CalHFA and you were on the Blue Ribbon.
Well, you on the,
Committee,
yeah,
do that.
you have
Yeah,
all the
so
background.
you have a lot of background.
I am happy to be there if you want me, but I'm also, if it's too much me, I get that.
No, we would love to have you. And again, no pressure. If I know everybody's on the executive committee in particular, because you're all doing other committee work too. So you don't have to volunteer now, but if you change your mind, let us know afterwards. Otherwise, perhaps maybe Judge Rossi will work with you to see if we can do some targeted outreach for maybe a member to another member from your committee.
And certainly if, I mean, if our patients are a friend who have been here longer, then I have another commission that you think, other than somebody on the PDI committee, or maybe you want someone on the PDI committee, in which case.
No, we're open. So if
Okay.
there's another chair of another committee that thinks like either themselves or they have somebody that they worked with that they think could be really good for this, you can give us a suggestion and you can reach out, or we can reach out for you to ask.
Thanks.
Great.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Let's give it some thought. And that's great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
volunteering, Judge Rosie. This is exciting, and it's great to see this has grown and is expanding the way it is. All right, the next presentation we have is on CalHFA, and I'll turn it over to Chris and Mara.
Hi, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Nice to see everybody this afternoon. I'm Mara Vibey. I'm a senior program analyst with the Office of Access and Inclusion, and I'm here to give you a very brief update on a new grant that we are currently standing up. It is essentially CalHFA Mach 2, and I'm going to give you a quick overview of what we've accomplished with CalHFA 1, just as some background before providing the update on this new funding opportunity, which is really exciting. So CalHFA 1 provided $12 million, 92% of which was dedicated to grant awards. Up to 8% went to support state bar administrative costs for the grant. Was awarded to 11 grantees across the state, and the grant period was 3 years. It ran from July 1, 2022, and would have just ended on June 30th, 2025, But CalHFA reached out to us in mid-June and informed us that there was some additional funding. And I know we mentioned this in an update earlier during this meeting. And the additional funding has been or is in the process of being allocated to the grantees, and they will be able to spend that additional funding on services that they provide, CalHFA services they provide between July 1 and September 30th. So the new official end date for the grantees that accepted the additional funding is September 30th. The source of the funding was federal pandemic relief funds and was provided through the American Rescue Plan Act. Specifically, it was through the Homeowners Association Fund. The focus was to provide foreclosure prevention and home retention and legal aid to homeowners in crisis. And clients were eligible if they were living at or below 150% of area and median income. We did provide funding preferences required that organizations provide funding to a minimum percent spending towards socially disadvantaged communities. And the overall impacts of this fund were really impressive. Services were provided in 47 of 58 counties, and across different areas of law. You can see that the majority of legal outcomes focused on housing, but there are also legal outcomes that touched on wills and trust, consumers' rights, income maintenance, and other areas of law. Overall, roughly 2,260 unique clients were served, and 61% were services specifically to seniors. This grant provided about $8.8 million worth of mortgage delinquency relief. So it was a really impactful grant. Which brings us to this new funding opportunity, which is going to be CalHFA 2. CalHFA 2 is $24 million in competitive grants, and it will be over a 4-year period. The source of this funding is from the 2012 settlement with 5 largest mortgage service providers. And recently there was a determination that those funds can be used specifically towards legal aid. So that's why this funding is now being made available to us through CalHFA. Over $20 billion in relief was provided to US consumers, and California received $410.6 million of that settlement amount. Some of the funds can now support housing-related legal aid, and this particular grant is going to be divided about similarly to CalHFA 1, where 8% will go to support state bar admin costs, and the remaining 92% will go specifically towards grant awards. The proposed grant period for CalHFA 2 is July 1, so grantees will be able to backbill and will extend all the way up through June 30th, 2029. So it does have a retroactive start. We are still in the process of negotiating the contract for this grant and developing the RFP. So what I provide now is with the caveat that conversations are still ongoing, but generally speaking, it will be to provide home ownership preservation, protect home equity, and prevent homeowner displacement through foreclosure prevention, loan modification assistance, litigation against mortgage service violations, debt collection defense, and related consumer protection services. There is likely going to be a preference in funding for applicants with experience serving clients after natural disasters, or who plan to develop that expertise in providing those very specific services.
Yeah, I know that. I saw that.
To clients.
Do order, just get sent and do the buy one.
For applicants serving underserved communities. Another unique element of this grant is that this grant will be incorporating a law graduate fellowship component. So really unique component to this grant and something we're very excited about. It is an optional funding component of the grant, so it is not required, but the grantees are going to be encouraged to apply for additional funding for first and second year licensed law graduates in order to strengthen California's pipeline for housing legal aid. This may, but doesn't need to be PLLs. So it would be a way of supporting the provisionally licensed program. But it can also be attorneys that have been, or law graduates that have been licensed through other means. The fellowship funding may include incentives such as higher budget ceilings, but we are still working out the specific details of that. But I do want to highlight that the fellowship component is something that we are looking forward to supporting as a part of this grant. It's going to include a comprehensive programming that will encourage trainings, mentorings, and intergrantee networking to encourage long-term careers in housing and legal aid. So this is the approximate grant-making timeline that we have currently. Staff are going to start promoting the opportunity essentially now. And we will be bringing in on August 28th the RFP to this PDI committee. On September 2nd, we are going to release the application, and it is going to be, the applications are going to be received, reviewed, and then we will come with recommended awards on October 24th and ready for the final approval of awards on November 7th. So we are very excited about this opportunity, but it is also a very tight timeline that we are trying to meet in order to get this stood up so that grantees can start back billing as quickly as possible and continuing the services that some of the current grantees are already providing. So in a quick nutshell, that is the update on CalHFA 2. I do want to mention that we are going to be providing a similar update to the commission at the end of next week, and may have some additional details to add as well. And I see Chris has raised his hand. Chris, do you have additional information you'd like to add?
I was just going to add two quick things. So one was like, how did this come about? And like, it seems like it kind of came about a little sort of quickly. Well, the answer is it did. So these particular dollars were actually restricted to other complementary purposes that didn't explicitly include these national mortgage special deposit funds that live in the government code that did not explicitly contemplate legal aid. And then there was a bill that became law at the very end of June 30th. It was AB 130 that expanded explicitly the purposes for these dollars to include, quote, providing legal services for home ownership preservation, including but not limited to foreclosure prevention. So that's how it started, basically like at the very end of June, this suddenly came up. And then we've been very happily, like I think with a lot of energy and optimism, and like we love that this is happening, running to get an RFP ready, sign a contract with CalHFA, the agency that ultimately kind of would oversee the work that we would be doing on this with the commission, and trying to get some awards ready by November so that the gap between CalHFA 1 and CalHFA 2 can be as short as possible. The only thing I'll say is I think that AB 130 expansion of permissible uses was the result of really steadfast and effective and thoughtful advocacy from the legal aid community. And so props to them for that. The only other thing I was going to add was it's the 8% for admin for CalHFA 1. So it's the same percentage for our contracts with CalHFA, or this was true for CalHFA 1. I think this could be true for CalHFA 2 as well. There's a provision that says that the state bar doesn't end up needing it all. It actually rolls over to the grantees. We did end up invoking that for CalHFA 1. As this committee might remember, I think CalHFA 1 has had 3 reallocations to date. And I think in the middle one, we actually put in some of our admin to kind of participate in that. So some of it did end up going to the grantees. For CalHFA 2, though, we're really excited about the fellowship component, as is CalHFA, the idea of like trying to expand the pipeline for housing legal aid in a, you know, by funding like multiple fellowships that could last multiple years. So that would come out of the admin. So we're not as confident, you know, how much that piece is going to cost. But for CalHFA 1, we did end up invoking that clause in our contract. Okay, that was my 2 things.
Thank you, Mara, and thank you, Chris. Efrain, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, this is exciting news, so congrats. That's great. I wonder, just thinking about the first one, the first tranche of money, since it was ARPA, I wonder, because these are now coming from private capital, are we going to be changing and easing a lot of the compliance And a lot of this, since
Yes,
it's
yes.
not going to be to CFR Treasury guide, are we gonna ease those burdens
Yeah,
too with this flexible money?
Yeah, we're already working with CalHFA to reduce the reporting framework for it because they are not federal funds. And then for us too, because they're not federal funds, it doesn't trigger single audit for us. So we won't be put through the very rigorous state preventative audit and then the single audit. So yes, it'll trickle down to our grantees. So that's a great
And then
question.
as a quick follow-up to that regarding the restrictions, so does that mean this capital, I know with the other funds, there were the restrictions based on people's immigration status. Does that mean that it's also not something that necessarily has to be a exclusion or
I
restriction?
didn't see it in the contract when I read it, so I do not believe so. The contract is not inked, but it is very close to being inked, and I did not see that provision.
I don't think it's an AB 130 either, because
Yeah.
they're not equal access fund
No.
dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Great, Selena.
One thing that I think is interesting about this funding source is it's funds that were encumbered for other purposes up to X dollars, and the other purposes didn't get used. And so they got unencumbered, which then created this funding source. And so it lets us know to kind of pay attention to other funding that's used for similar purposes, and then kind of keep an eye on it. Like if it's a very large number and it's being encumbered but not used, is there a way that y'all can capture some of those funds for these very limited grants? Because 25 million is a lot of money, but it was a lot of different pots that had to be unencumbered first.
Yeah. And and Chris mentioned this, like like we had an attorney at a specific support center, National Housing Law Project, that was really like she drove this. I mean, she worked with CalHFA, the governor's office. She's the one that like made this happen. We were notified, I want to say like August last year. We actually presented to the commission, or I mentioned to the commission that there might be some funding that might be coming down the pipeline, but then it was sitting in the governor's office, and then we didn't think that was going to happen. And then she honestly single-handedly resurrected this and made this happen. So again, really, if Lisa's out there listening right now, really a big thanks to Lisa Sitkin at National Housing Law Project.
That's terrific. This is exciting. It's great to see. It's always good to have more money that we can distribute. And I think that's a great idea, Selena, to keep an eye on some of these more creative ways of getting and distributing funds. So wonderful. All right. Thank you guys. Any other questions? Any other thoughts, feedback, comments on this one? Okay. All right, then I guess now let's turn to next week's commission meeting. I'll give it over to Dwan.
Yeah. And I'll keep it really brief. The major agenda item for next week, and you already kind of heard a little bit touched on by Jason, is the staff has been working on the ILTEF application. So you're going to see the full package of that recommendation, from pro bono allocations to who's going to be eligible. We do again anticipate a little bit of a lengthier discussions regarding updates from the eligibility review conference. I think that will take a little bit of time, and then you'll hear a version of some of these presentations today, in addition to Joyce is going to present to you where we're at in our implementation plan for the commission. And then Elizabeth and Erica are going to do an update because since we met, we have published the Justice Gap study. So those are two other additional kind of substantive updates that you'll get next week.
Great. Looking forward to that discussion. I think there'll be, it'll be an interesting one. I think there's a lot to talk about. And I think some of the issues that we raised today are really helpful. Like I said before, to kind of set the context for how we want to think about it and where the discussion goes. Catherine.
I just want to confirm, these are in-person meetings, right? Because the
Oh,
agenda
yes.
says teleconference, and then it's a.
Oh no, I think I got this question. Maybe we didn't do drop messaging. So this is the one meeting of the year where it's in person, either the San Francisco office or the Los Angeles office, and then we also have a Zoom option. So for commissioners that can't attend, they can Zoom in, and that's already been noticed. But
Yeah,
I
it
can reiterate.
just when you look at the agenda,
Okay.
like only look at when you pull it up and you just look at the top, like what shows on my phone, it says teleconference.
Oh, okay. Is that a way to change? Can we change that? I don't know if we can, because sometimes some of these things we're kind of stuck with how is that something we can do in person and?
Well, it seems like in person and teleconference, right? Because I don't know, I thought it was in person and then I looked and anyway.
Yeah, I think Selena asked me the same
clear.
question. So maybe there's this, I don't know, Crystal, if you.
No, we can take a look at it. I believe there's a hybrid option, but I'll work with Kim on that. Yeah.
And then I will, when I send out the meeting materials for next week, later today, either Chris or I will be sending that. We'll make it very clear.
That would
Thank you.
great.
Okay. All right, I think that wraps up what we had on our written agenda. Is there anything else anybody wanted to raise? Any comments, any thoughts? Looking forward to next week's meeting and sort of embarking on this next year. Lots to do, lots that's been made easier by the fact that we've done a lot of the throat clearing, foundational institutionalizing of our new structure and everything else. So you know, it's great to sort of take that next step forward, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you guys. Thank you very much to all of you on the executive committee, leading the committees, to staff, for all the work that you're doing to make sure that we are running efficiently. And yeah, and I think for next week, to the extent that we are kind of in these discussions, I just want to, you know, encourage everybody to kind of push along the conversations with some of the experiences that you guys have gone through in terms of, you know, especially on these eligibility issues, that for those of you who are closer to them and who have been working with them, I think it's helpful, especially for some of the new commissioners, to kind of understand background, understand kind of the way the process works. And can work. And then, you know, I'm looking forward to kind of how we might build a working group to work on some of the refining and getting better about some of these issues for new applicants in particular. So thank you all. Have a great weekend. I think I have to say those magic words. This meeting is now ended, has now ended. And we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, everyone.